Taiwan ranks globally in so many perspectives, whether in terms of the success of its healthcare system, its ability to deal with pandemics, its safety and crime record, very safe place. If you look at its economic accomplishments, it's usually very high in terms of both nominal GDP and per capita GDP. Its success in science and technology, its trading relationships. I think it's varied between being the 8th and the 11th largest trading partner of the United States, for example. So the purpose of all that is Taiwanese are often self-effacing. When I saw the Human Index report and Taiwan had ranked 14th, it wasn't a surprise. It's sort of an inevitability, particularly when you look at the way the Freedom Index is set up. It first gives you points for personal freedoms, and just the fact that Taiwan has embraced the idea that people should have personal choice with regard to their partners, whether they're gay or they're straight or whatever. They're free to marry who they want. That kind of personal freedom. The fact that, the U.S. still hasn't had a woman president, but Taiwan has. A large percentage, much larger than the U.S., number of women are representatives in the legislature. So there's no surprise there in terms of freedom of expression, freedom to say what you think. There's no restrictions on that. And then the political freedoms, there's a lively contest between political parties. I've lived in, for example, South Korea, which, I think ranked 30th as opposed to Taiwan's 14th ranking. And I can see why, perhaps, because there's a little bit less going for South Korea in terms of political freedom. There seems to be a little bit more restrictions. It's not as wide open. It tends to be dominated, pretty much by whichever party comes to power. But Taiwan is just a much more open place, and people express all kinds of views. And Taiwan ranks overall very highly in almost every category I can think of on a global basis. And in a way, it's surprising that it comes out, just following actually most of the countries that rank very highly in freedom indexes are in fact the Scandinavian countries, the small European countries, New Zealand, countries that are relatively small, racially homogeneous in general, countries like Finland and Sweden and Norway, Estonia, Switzerland.
As a former U.S. ambassador and diplomat, how does this compare with the U.S., another democracy?
It's also no surprise to me that the U.S. didn't rank that highly, given the deep political divisions we see in the United States. The terrible, since safety and security are one of the points for personal freedom, there's an awful lot of crime still in America. There's an awful lot of violence. There's a lack of gun laws. So you see a lot of problems in the United States that you don't see in Taiwan. So when my daughters have visited Taiwan and they'd go out at night, to clubs, I never worried about them.
Ambassador, the report also mentions a strong link between freedom and democracy. How do you see that in terms of reflecting in Taiwan's high ranking?
There's lively debates between the two major political parties, but now in recent years, there's also two other parties that have come up, more minor support, but also gaining some popular support. So there's a continuing lively debate among all the parties, really, about the direction of the government, about policies. It's a very healthy debate. There are newspapers reflecting different points of view. There are dialogues that take place in think tanks, in newspapers, on television between people who have different views. Taiwan Plus itself is noted for its discussions between people from different parties with very different views. What's even more remarkable in my mind is that given the threat that the PRC represents to Taiwan, because of their continuing threatening words, threats against Taiwan, nonetheless, you see people speaking up and saying, well, we need a more conciliatory policy with regard to China. That frankly surprises me and frightens me a bit. But on the other hand, it shows that it's really, an open society and people can express their views. And as I say, there's more. It's not so common these days in the United States to see Republicans and Democrats debating in the same venue. They tend to get on their own channels, one kind or another. So the Republicans are on Fox News, and you'll see, the Democrats on MSNBC. They have different channels that they operate in. Less often are they engaging with one another on the same media.
So, Ambassador, does this strike contrast with China?
The biggest outpouring of popular opposition to the government came some weeks ago when people went into the streets and protested against the COVID policy. Subsequently, we've heard that using facial recognition software, these people were pursued, and many of them have wound up being locked up. It was a signal once again that an authoritarian government, you cannot disagree with the government, even on an issue which really affects people's personal lives so deeply, like healthcare, the best means to fight disease. If you disagree with a government policy which did a 180-degree change of direction from going to a total lockdown to suddenly, without any warning, opening up to everyone. And it's no surprise for me, therefore, that China ranks so low in the freedom reports.
Does that affect the well-being of Chinese citizens?
Absolutely, it affects the well-being of people because they can't pursue policies as groups about, what's in the best health interests of the Chinese people. They can't say, well, look, this is what some other countries have tried and it's working there. Why can't we try that as well? It's a dictatorship from one man at the top who decides what the policy is going to be, and then he enforces it. And there's nobody who can say no. This has effect not only on the population, the health of the population of China, but the health of the world.